Today, Game 2 of the semi-finals of the FIDE World Cup was played in Baku, and I would love to be able to report on some dramatic games, but unfortunately, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. First of all, let's take the match between Sergei Karjakin and Pavel Eljanov. Of course, they drew their first game. Here, Karjakin, with the white pieces, has reached a position from the English opening, and it's a very well-known position. For example, here, Knight d4 was played in the World Championship match between Kasparov and Karpov in 1987. More recently, Aronian exchanged knights here against Anand in Stavanger. And today, Karjakin uncorked a novelty, Knight h4. So if knight takes pawn here, then the knight wants to go into f5 with some initiative. But Eljanov, after 4.5 minutes, snuffed that possibility out because he wants to snap off the knight if it comes into f5. d3 played. Knight g6 after 19.5 minutes played by Eljanov. And then Karjakin thought for 31 minutes before exchanging on g6, and he offered a draw, which Eljanov accepted. So that means that they will go into the tie-breaks tomorrow. Interesting decision from Karjakin. You know, he plays very, very cautiously. That's been his strategy so far in the World Cup, and it's been very successful, so you can't knock him. I think he probably feels that he didn't want to risk too much in this from this particular position. It is quite double-edged. And I think he probably feels that his best chance of defeating Eljanov is in quicker games. I think Karjakin is probably a better rapid player than Eljanov. Anyway, we shall see. A very, very cautious approach from Karjakin. Let's take a look at the other game played today. Peter Svidler against Eljanov and Giri. And if you remember, Giri is in a must-win situation. Peter Svidler won a very nice game with black yesterday. So Svidler just needs a draw to go through to the final and to qualify for the candidates. It was a pretty tame game. Karjakin played by Giri. Svidler played quite a dull line with white. The queens were traded very early on. And they reached this endgame, which, well, if anyone is better, I would say white is very slightly better. Giri has just taken on a2, rook d2. So why is white slightly better? Well, obviously the split pawns here. The isolated pawn on d5, and white has decent pressure. Now, Svidler chose just to sit tight. He could perhaps have advanced his pawn slowly on the king's side, prepared that, maybe even considered bringing his king over to the queen side with some preparation. But certainly the advance of the pawns on the king's side was an option worth considering, but Svidler just chose to sit there. And, well, almost 20 moves later, you can see that not much has changed in the position. So Svidler just needs a draw. But by this stage, this was move 45. They'd reached the time control. Lots of toing and throwing, and Svidler decided to take some concrete action. He played b3. Now, why has Svidler suddenly decided to change the nature of the position? Well, he realizes that he can basically force an exchange of rooks, which relieves some of the pressure on his position. If the rook retreats, then c4 is uncomfortable for black. Obviously, that pawn can't really be taken. The d-file can't open because of rook d6 check. So here, Giri really has to exchange rooks. And now black has to be very careful about white taking over the initiative. For example, if the rook comes back this way, then white seizes the open file first and can start to hassle black here. So Giri played b4, a pawn sacrifice. And that gets his king in. You know, if given a few moves, then black would take here and start to use the d-pawn. But Well, even here, king e2 is fine for white and king d3, but Svidler chose to exchange more pieces. Here, black has to exchange off, so now we've got into a rook and pawn endgame, and white is absolutely fine here, of course. Giri chose to play g5 and offered a draw. Well, there's really not a lot going on in this position at all. Both sides are absolutely fine. So that meant Svidler qualifies not only for the final of this World Cup, but also for the candidates, as the two finalists in the World Cup go through to the candidates tournament. So congratulations to him. You know, he has played really very well, very consistently so far. Svidler said after the game, well, it wasn't the most interesting, but it was a case of just getting the job done. And, you know, he's so experienced and knows exactly how to handle these kind of situations. So, yeah, he's played extremely well. Anish Giri goes out, but he still picks up $50,000 for his trouble. And actually, he is going to qualify for the candidates by virtue of the fact that he has one of the highest average ratings over the past 12 months. So he and Topalov will go through on that basis. Svidler qualifies for the candidates. Nakamura and Caruana have already qualified through the FIDE Grand Prix series. Anand has also qualified as loser of the previous world title match. So there are just 2 spots remaining for the candidates. One of them will go to Eljanov or Karjakin, and then there's the organisers' wild card as well. Tiebreak between Eljanov and Karjakin played tomorrow.